Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, Chapter 41. The Bokharian Dervish, Haji Atzvat's Druv. As my first meeting with this contemporary terrestrial three-brained being, with whom I saw the said experiments, and thanks to whom, in all probability, information about the fundamental sacred cosmic law of Heptaparapashanoch will again be established there, and become accessible to everyone, even from among the ordinary contemporary beings with a thirst for knowledge, may turn out to be extremely interesting and instructive to you. I shall therefore tell you all about this meeting also in all possible detail. This first meeting of mine with him took place 3 terrestrial years before my final departure from that solar system. Once, while traveling over the continent Asia, in that part of it called Bokhara, I chanced to meet and get on friendly terms with a certain three-brained being belonging to the group inhabiting that part of the surface of your planet, who was by profession what they call there a dervish, and whose name was Haji Zafir Bokharian. He was very typical of those contemporary terrestrial three-brained beings who have a tendency to enthuse over, as is said there, higher matters, and who always automatize themselves to speak about them without any essential cognition with anyone they meet, on opportune and inopportune occasions. And whenever we met, he also liked to talk only about these matters. One day we started talking about what is called there the ancient Chinese science, named Shat Chai Mernis. This science is nothing but fragments of the above-mentioned totality of true information concerning the sacred Heptaparapashanoch, cognized by the great Chinese twin brothers and by other genuine ancient scientists, and then called by them the totality of true information about the law of ninefoldness. I have already told you that certain fragments of this knowledge remained intact and passed from generation to generation through a very limited number of initiated beings there. I must here say that if these fragments, which have by chance remained intact and which have passed and are still passing there from generation to generation through this very limited number of initiated beings, do not fall into the hands of contemporary scientists there, then this will be a great stroke of luck for the future three-brained beings of your planet. And it will be a great stroke of luck because if these surviving fragments of genuine knowledge were to fall into the hands of contemporary scientists there, then thanks to their inherency for wiseacring, they would without fail cook up all kinds of their scientific porridge about the sense put into these fragments, and thereby the, without this, scarcely smoldering reason of all the other three-brained beings would be entirely extinguished. And besides, these last remnants of the former great attainments of their ancestors would thereby be also completely wiped off the face of this ill-fated planet. And so, my boy, once when I was talking with this dervish, Haji Zafir Bokharian, about the ancient Chinese science called Shat Chai Mernis, he, in the course of conversation, proposed that I should go with him to another dervish, a friend of his, a great authority on this ancient Chinese science, to talk about it with him. He told me that his friend resided in Upper Bokhara, far away from everyone, and was there occupied with certain experiments concerning that same science. Having no special business in that town where we then happened to be, and as his friend resided just among those mountains, the nature of which I had long intended to see, I at once agreed, and on the very next day we set off. From that town where we were, we walked 3 days. Finally, high up in the mountains of Upper Bokhara, we stopped at a small gorge. This part of Bokhara is called Upper because it is very mountainous and much higher than that part of Bokhara which, to distinguish it, is called Lower Bokhara. At the said gorge, my acquaintance, the Dervish Haji Zafir Bogaidin, asked me to help him move a small stone slab to one side. And when we had moved it, a small aperture was revealed underneath it, from the edges of which 2 iron bars projected. He put these bars together and began to listen. Soon a strange sound was heard coming from them, and to my astonishment, Haji Zafir Bogaidin said something into that aperture in a language unknown to me. After he had finished speaking, we moved the stone slab back to its old place and went on. After having gone a considerable distance, we stopped in front of a rock, and Haji Zafir Bogaidin began to wait very tensely for something, when suddenly the enormous stone which lay there opened and formed an entrance into a kind of cave. We entered this cave and began moving forward when I noticed that our way was lit up alternately by what are called gas and electricity. Although this lighting astonished me and several questions about it arose in me, I nevertheless decided not to disturb the serious attentiveness of my fellow traveler. When we had again walked a considerable distance further, we saw at one of the turnings, coming to meet us, another terrestrial 3-brained being, who met us with the greetings customary there on such occasion and led us further. He, as it appeared, was the friend of my first dervish acquaintance. He was already, according to terrestrial understanding, quite elderly, and being tall in comparison with those living round about, seemed extraordinarily thin. His name was Haji Asvat's Truv. While talking with us, he led us to a small section of the cave, where we all sat down on the felt that covered the floor there, and while conversing began to eat what is called cold Bokharian shilaplav out of earthen vessels which this elderly being brought to us from a neighboring section. While we were eating, my first dervish acquaintance told him, by the way, that I was also very interested in the science Shat Chai Mernis, and explained briefly which questions were already well known to me, and what in general we had talked about before. After that, the dervish Haji Asvat's Truv began to question me himself, and I gave him corresponding answers, but of course in that form already habitual to me, by which I could always hide my real nature. There on your planet, I became in general so skillful in talking in this manner that your favorites always took me for one of their brother scientists. From subsequent conversation with him, I understood that this respected Haji Asvat's Truv had already been long interested in the said knowledge, and that during the last 10 years he had been studying it exclusively only practically. I also understood that from this study he had attained results such as it is no longer proper to terrestrial 3-brained beings to attain.